Okay, so let's make a start. Welcome to Council Chamber for this meeting of Harlow Council's Cabinet. The first item on the agenda are apologies for absence. And I know one, Eugenie Harvey, who's had to make a visit at very short notice to Australia. Declarations of interest. I have one. My declaration is that I have a non-pecuniary interest in item 9A by virtue of being on the board of the Youth Concern Trust, which is a recipient of grant aid as a result of Councillor Harvey's delegated decision. This meeting is only being asked to note that action, and having taken advice from the monitoring officer, I intend to remain in the meeting for that item unless specific matters relating to that grant are raised by members. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Although not a member of this committee, my mere presence in the room, if you come to discuss item 13, by virtue of the fact that I have a pecuniary interest in a service to do with the council, I will have to leave the room. Or something on that line. I've forgotten it. I can't find the actual wording, but I will find it.
I think we understand your interest. Thank you. So let's consider the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting, pages 4 to 7. Is that an accurate reflection of the meeting? Great. Good. Any matters arising from the minutes of the last meeting? No? Right, moving on then. Written questions from the public. Mr. Hode.
Yes.
Would you like to come to the microphone?
Sorry about that. At the council meeting on the 28th of February 2019, the opposition proposed that their alternative budget for 2019-20, this included that the council should encourage paperless billing of council tax. In the discussion that followed, you said that this was not possible to do because of some act of Parliament. In the paperwork I received for the 2019-20 council tax bill, there was a statement that one could receive a paperless bill. Can one receive a paperless bill?
Yes, it is possible for residents to move to paperless billing for their council tax, thus avoiding the need to print and post paper bills to households. To be able to do this, however, residents liable for council tax must first sign up to the council's online account facility via the council's website to access their council tax bill online. The annual bill or any subsequent revised bills issued during the year will be posted to their online account, and the resident will be advised via an email alert that their bill is ready to view. If a customer has registered for an online account and paperless billing, then they still have the right to receive a paper copy of the bill should they require one. As part of the legal recovery processes, if a customer is registered online for paperless billing but has failed to access their online bill, then the council must ensure that a paper copy of the bill has been sent to the resident prior to the commencement of legal recovery action. Do you want a supplementary?
Yes. I am not very happy in agreeing to paperless billing if I'm not allowed to enjoy a saving, which most people that offer billing do. Will the council consider introducing a scheme that offered a slight saving for those that wished to go down the line of paperless billing?
Okay, your comments are noted, Mr. Hode. I understand that there was a meeting of the Housing Standards Board where this matter was raised and that you attended last week, and we are considering all options. Thank you. Mrs. Nicola Purse.
Evening. I have a question. I understand that Council holds several funds for Church Langley that have been left by the developers. Can you tell me how much this is and the purpose of those funds?
Councillor Daniels.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's quite correct. The Council does hold a number of funds which were established during the payments made to the Council. These stem from a collection of various planning and individual estate grounds maintenance agreements negotiated with the 15 or so separate house builders and the master planner involved in the planning and delivery of Church Langley development. The major element of the infrastructure funds represents a fixed purpose trust fund attached to a covenant for the Council to undertake specific landscaping maintenance for an indefinite time period. The infrastructure fund has been subjected to previous reviews involving council officers and Church Langley councillors. As a result of those reviews, it was agreed that the infrastructure agreement exists to cover the woodlands, footpaths, play areas and associated landscape areas. This would be to ensure that the woodland is maintained in accordance with good practice to keep landscaped areas mowed and free from rubbish and weeds, and at least once every planting season replace diseased or dead shrubs, plants or trees with similar ones. But can be substituted, for example, on heath or on health and safety grounds. To maintain footpaths or play areas for which any machinery or apparatus on the same should be maintained for 15 years. As at the 31st of March 2018, the balance of the relevant funds remained at approximately £430,000 and is openly reported in the Council's annual accounts and the annual budget reports as part of this disclosure of information relating to our reserves. Also, there is approximately £70,000, and this might be more pertinent to you, for recreation facilities which could be spent. There has been expressions of interest for community facilities, and these plans need to be developed so that this money can be spent, and I would encourage that to happen. Further work has to be ongoing since last autumn the council officers and local ward councillors to identify an upgraded programme of works for grounds maintenance across Church Langley area for which the funds will be used in subsequent years. A major issue with this project has been the identification of land ownership, which is very problematic. Some of the areas where grounds maintenance issues are frequently reported are actually still either in the ownership of the developers or actually residents' responsibilities. In order to maintain the funds in perpetuity, it will be necessary to carefully profile expenditure so that adequate balances remain across a protracted timescale. If, for example, the total balance were anticipated to remain available to support council maintenance works for a period of 50 years, then the scope for the annual expenditure stands at £13,300 per annum, with variations dependent upon interest rates and inflation. I hope that explains it thoroughly. I'm sorry for such a long reply, but anyway, thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Could you give us a proposed time that we're actually going to release these funds, and what are they going to be released to use for?
I myself, I've been involved in negotiating with your social club in Church Langley a few years ago when they were talking about better facilities and their car park. I was invited to their meeting. I encouraged them to develop a business plan, and I really would urge the Church Langley councillors to get their act together so that this money can be spent, because you actually need a business plan to be put in place and for the benefit of the Church Langley residents. It's been sitting there for ages, and the local councillors really need to get their act together. Sorry, Simon, to surprise you so much.
Thank you. Right, so if Councillor Carter has finished throwing glasses, let's move on to item 7A, a petition and I believe the petitioner is Mr. Adam Cochrane.
Israel is a racist state. It's a racist state because my Jewish friend Rebecca, who has never been to Israel, has...
Point of order.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Excuse me, I must intervene here. You cannot have that sort of language in the council chamber in a public meeting. It may or may not be your view, but I don't think it's one that we actually wish to hear in this meeting.
I'm going to have to start my time again, I'm afraid. This is the whole point.
By all means, but can you just watch what you say? Because I will come in again.
It's a bit difficult to talk about the IHRA definition if I can't use the words that it restricts. That's the whole point, isn't it? I have a 3-minute speech that I've prepared, and afterwards you can, if you don't agree with it, then that's fine. But I need to be able to use the words because the whole point is that you're limiting my right to speak.
Mr. Cochrane, this council does not tolerate racist behaviour of any sort whatsoever.
Israel's a racist state.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Please to make your statement, but in that statement, please refrain from any racist comments. Thank you.
Okay. I think so we can move this along, I'll use the phrase Israel is a state and people will know what I mean. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. I'll start my 3 minutes. Israel is a state. It's a state because my Jewish friend Rebecca, who has never been to Israel, is allowed the right to return there. But my Palestinian friend, whose family were ethnically cleansed from Palestine, is denied that right. Israel is a state because there are over 65 laws discriminating against Palestinians. And Israel is a state because it explicitly says in its new nation-state law that the right to self-determination is exclusively for the Jewish people and is denied to Palestinian citizens. Now, are we saying that all Israelis are racist? No, definitely not. In fact, some of the best campaigners for Palestine are Israelis. What we are saying is that racism is an integral part of Israel's project, which relies on the expulsion, subjugation and exclusion of the Palestinians. Now, of course, Harlow Council is...
Can I interrupt you? You are allowed 3 minutes to talk about the petition.
Yes, sir.
And the petition specifically asks about Harlow Council adding a caveat to the IHRA petition definition. This is a speech about your feelings about Israel and Palestine. Can you restrict yourself to comments about this petition, please? Thank you.
Wait. Funny enough, the next line is going to go on to exactly that. It's just hard when you're constantly interrupted. I thought we lived in a democracy. Sorry about that. Now, Harlow Council is, of course, free to disagree with us. But what you're not free to do is call us anti-Semitic for challenging Israel's racism. The campaign against the IHRA definition is supported by Jewish organisations worldwide. We have a statement here from 40 Jewish groups which condemns the IHRA. They say, we urge our governments, municipalities, universities and other institutions to reject the IHRA definition. Israel does not represent us and cannot speak for us when committing crimes against Palestinians and denying their UN stipulated rights. Now, there are people on Harlow Council who I have respect for. There are people on Harlow Council who I have marched side by side against anti-Semitism with, and they must know they're on the wrong side here. But I understand that they're under huge political pressure at the moment, including from dishonest Tory councillors. And I want to say this to some of the Tory hypocrites in this building. If you want to challenge anti-Semitism, then tell your European party, tell them not to pass a motion defending anti-Semites like Viktor Orban, and tell them to break their coalition with the Holocaust-denying anti-Semitic Polish Law and Justice Party. Because let me be very clear, no one will be taking advice on anti-racism from the windrush-deported, far-right supporting Tory party.
This has nothing whatsoever to do with
black, white, old, young, Christian, Muslim, Jew, standing together against racism. We're the anti-racist.
Mr. Cochrane, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to give you an answer to the petition that you supplied. I'm not going to entertain some of the comments you made. This is not a space for a speech about Israel.
It's a space for a speech on the petition. Let me have my 3 minutes on the petition.
Can I make it quite clear? You're meant to be summarising what is in the petition.
I have 3 minutes summary, but it's turned into 10 minutes and I can get interrupted. Well, I'm on my final line now anyway, so it'll probably be interrupted 10 times, but I might as well finish.
You're letting him
3 minutes is allowed.
Yes, but 3 minutes without interruptions. Yeah, I'll finish. As I said, if you see us here today, black, white, old, young, Christian, Muslim and Jew, united, standing together, we're the ones that actually fight against anti-Semitism. We're the ones you actually see on the streets against anti-Semitism. But we're also the ones that take to the streets for Palestine. When I march arm in arm with my Jewish brothers and sisters, and we say 1, 2, 3, 4, occupation no more, 5, 6, 7, 8, Israel is a racist state.
You can either let me respond to the petition, and I'll be responding to the petition, but if you have this sort of behaviour, I'll have to ask you to leave the chamber. Thank you. I do have a response.
I won't interrupt you while you're responding, unlike you did to me.
Mr. Cochrane, if you interrupt me, I'll ask you to leave. Thank you for your petition. The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism was adopted by the Labour Party nationally without additions, deletions or caveats. This council did the same. I spoke on this matter on the 1st of November 2018 when the definition was accepted unanimously. At the time I said this, and I hope my comments at the time addressed some of the concerns in the petition. This is what I said. There have been some concerns amongst people interested in international affairs that accepting the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, together with the 11 examples, would prevent them from ever criticising the actions of the Israeli state, without being themselves labelled as being anti-Semitic. Hence, they have been worried about accepting it without deletions or additions or caveats. However, proper reading of the text shows these fears are unfounded. The IHRA definition explicitly accepts that criticism of actions taken by the State of Israel can be made, as long as those criticisms are not used as a vehicle to deny the right of the State of Israel to exist, as long as those criticisms are of the actions of the state and not of the Jewish religion, as long as the State of Israel is not singled out for criticism, and as long as comparisons are not made with the Holocaust. And I went on to say, thus I feel confident that I could, if I wanted, speak out about the treatment of Palestinians by the State of Israel. Just as I could, if I wanted, to speak out about the actions of the Saudi Arabian regime in Yemen, the appalling human tragedy unfolding for the Rohingya people in Myanmar, and countless other examples of governments acting in ways that are unacceptable. I made a criticism of Israel in that. All very different issues, but all deeply troubling to people interested in international affairs. Those were my words in this council on the 1st of November. You tell me there are Palestinians living in Harlow whose families have experienced great suffering at the hands of the government of Israel. The adoption of the IHRA definition by Harlow Council does not prevent them from discussing their personal or family experiences or oppression, nor does it prevent them from openly advocating for their human rights. Harlow Council is an equal opportunities employer, and residents of Palestinian origin will be treated fairly and equitably under the law. Therefore, the caveat you suggest is not needed. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Ingle. Yes, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism was passed at the Bucharest plenary in 2016, a plenary attended by 32 nations. Since then, 17 nations and the European Union have all signed up to the definition uncaveated and unamended. There is a view held by academics that if one organisation or institution can amend the wording to suit its own needs, then by logical corollary, anyone else could do the same, which would once again revert to a world where anti-Semitism would go unaddressed simply because different entities cannot agree on the definition. Therefore, this council adopted it in its natural state. As the leader of the council has pointed out, that does not stop people voicing fair criticism, and he's already outlined the ways in which that can be done. However, and you see, this is where it gets ridiculous, because actually the problems in the Middle East require level-headed debate. And what we saw tonight was shouting and screaming and racist accusations of racist. And despite the fact that I interrupted none of you and sat and listened to every word you said, you have continued to interrupt me whilst I'm speaking. And this is just an example, I believe, of the far left on the march in this town that needs to be dealt with. The IHRA definition should not be caveated in any way. I'm very pleased that this council passed it in its uncaveated form, and I reject the need for it to be caveated further or any amendment that is made by suggestion of this petition tonight. I thank you for bringing the petition. I was very happy to listen to what you had to say. It's a shame you weren't happy to listen to what I had to say in response.
Thank you. So, a very brief summary. Harlow Council, whether you like it or not, whether you want to shout me down, is an equal opportunities employer. The petition specifically spoke about fears about not getting equal treatment. If there are any suggestions that you would like to bring to my attention of Palestinians being unfairly treated because of their race or their religion or any other reason that falls foul of the equal opportunities legislation, please bring it to me and I will act upon it. But this council will not be adding a caveat to the IHRA definition.
Shame on you.
Israel is a racist state.
And at that point, I'm going to ask you to vacate the chamber.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Shame on you. Shame on you. Israel is a racist state. It's a racist state, and it's not racist to say it.
Stop the video. Sorry, button on the. I'll do it before we go. And don't forget your clock.
No, that's ours. That's your clock.
Thank you.
Shame.
Right. So, we move on to item 8, the forward plan, which is on pages 8 to 16 of your pack. Just give me a moment to find it. There we are. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Jeff. Page 13, we have the award of telecoms management contract with Harlow Science Park. It's not the kind of contract we see very often. I'm just wondering whether it's just to do with the property that we're building at the moment, or indeed the entire estate, and what the nature of the contract will be?
Spanish?
It is I think it's a first for Harlow Council to award a contract of this nature. It's probably the first time we've been involved in a development of this scale. The contracts will be awarded for the whole of the science park, not just the building that we are constructing. Given that Harlow Council has funded and owns the telecommunications infrastructure on the Harlow Science Park, we have the ability to operate our own telecoms service and to provide the service to all of the occupiers on the site. I would hope in due course that the council will receive some income from that in later years. The way that we phrase the tender documentation is for bidders to provide information about how they would share profits with the council. Certainly in the early years I would expect that to be probably nil because of the large upfront capital investment the provider will have to make, but in later years we would expect some income to come back to the council because of our ownership of the infrastructure.
Thank you.
Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Page 14, the homelessness strategy. I would just encourage, given that councils of all different colours are involved in different charities in the town that support people who are sadly homeless or have very difficult circumstances in their life, that this is brought forward. I think that this would bring cross-party appeal, given the interest across the board on this. And I would just encourage the council to try and bring forward work on the homelessness strategy and in fact consider whether or not there could be a cross-party group of councillors to look at some of the subjects purely around the themes. Obviously people have noted the work that has been ongoing with charities across the town. So I very much hope that this could be done in the spirit of cross-party work because there's such an interest across the board.
Thank you, Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. In response to that, welcome comments. I'd like to say this just won't be a homelessness strategy. For the first time ever, this will be a homelessness and rough sleepers strategy. This will be the first time ever. That's the reason for the delay in the forward plan, because it has to go out for consultation. Amongst that consultation, I've been speaking with officers obviously on this subject quite a lot, as you can imagine, over the last couple of years. We are going to be doing some workshops with all our partners. I have asked the officers to include a workshop with all 33 members to be invited. So cross-party, all members can put their views on homelessness and rough sleeping and the way forward. And before it comes back to the Cabinet, that workshop will take place with all members.
Thank you, Councillor Ingle. I-009-889, the Public Space Protection Order. I'm aware, obviously, that the Cabinet member isn't able to be here today, but perhaps Jane Greer would be able to ask, or someone can get me a written response. I've raised it before, but when that Public Space Protection Order for the town centre comes back, will it be amended to take on board the concerns that the police and others have raised about aggressive begging within the town centre?
Well, first of all, the reason it's being delayed is because we didn't have very many responses. And in fact, we went back out, and I've got some numbers here that you might be interested in. In the first phase of the consultation, we had 4 web responses, 1 written response from the police that you mentioned, and some Facebook posts. Going out a second time and being more proactive in seeking responses, elicited 53 web feedbacks, 54 street consultations, and many Facebook posts. It's difficult to assess how many because people reply and they go off thread, of course. We will be considering all of those responses. Right. So, do we have to note the forward plan? Are we happy to note the forward plan?
Agreed.
Noted, yeah.
Thank you. And let's move on to item 9. Recent decisions taken by the portfolio holders in this case. 9A is a decision taken by Councillor Harvey, the portfolio holder for community and wellbeing, to do with partnership grants made by the council, and B is a decision taken by the portfolio holder for regeneration, Councillor Strachan, to do with some tree planting in the town square. There are a couple of amendments to the first one, you're quite right, 9A. So if we go to page 18, I'll alert you to those. A couple of unfortunate typos, but you need to correct that. If we look at the second recipient on page 18, it's the Michael Roberts Charitable Trust, not the Martin Roberts Charitable Trust. And the third item is integration support services, not integrated support services. Are we happy to note those two decisions?
Agreed.
Thank you. Now then, on to item 10, the joint finance...
There's a second decision.
I did mention them both.
Yes.
I said, are we happy to note them both?
We haven't asked for any questions or comments. Thank you.
That was the point at which I expected you to say something.
I was busy annotating the correction. On page 19, about the planting in the Market Square,
yes.
It refers to a minimum of 5 trees and funding up to £50,000, which suggests you could be spending up to £10,000 per tree. I'm sure that's not actually the case, and there might be some slightly better parameters. But if you leave it like that, you could be in for some very expensive trees.
I didn't actually hear a question in that.
Are you seriously planning on spending £10,000 on a tree in the Market Square?
Councillor Strachan.
It's a bit more complicated than the tree. But the cost of replanting the red pots is a very, very similar price. And then on top of that, as you pointed out, the factor of actually, if you look at any planting that we've done over the years, including the red pots, other containers of some sort, the trees die because of the cost of the non-grade maintenance, which has never been factored in. So actually, when you factor in that on top of actually filling out the pots, the cost is the same. Whereas actually where we put the trees in, it just isn't, we would pull it out of thin air either. Where you put trees into the ground in the way they're put in, apart from original watering in, they don't need any particular on-ground maintenance. The trees that we're particularly looking at are silver birches, which, as anybody who works in London and some major cities know, that the plant being planted everywhere. One, because maintenance is minimal, and actually they're really, really good for the environment. They just suck the carbon dioxide out of the air. So that's what we're looking at, and that's just, once we've got some trees in, there are other avenues to actually get in other trees with a lot less cost. And also, obviously the streets in the environment is a lot prettier than big red pots.
Yep.
Noted? Thank you. Right, so let's move on then. Item 10, revisited Joint Finance Performance Report, Quarter 3, 2018 to 19, which is pages 21 to 39.
So moved, Chair.
And I'm seconding.
Thank you. Good control, Chair, of the service budget. We said it was going to be tight. If you actually look at the actual documentation of actual controlled expenditure. But of course the government has suddenly come in, out of the blue, given, I suppose, the chaotic nature of a government that barely functions. They have actually given us unexpected business relief on the schemes that were announced in regards to small businesses. I was hoping that would happen, but I don't know how long it will actually go on for. So in fact, in a sense, it's being treated as a windfall, but at the moment it actually appears in the general fund budget, so it gives a false impression of an outturn of over a million, when really the true report is that we're in Q3, we're within £20,000 really of our projected budget, if that makes sense.
Questions? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Page 23, Section 9, when the report looks at significant risks and opportunities. Part D of that, what I'm looking for is just a reflection of current events. Obviously, we've had the spring statement. The Chancellor set out that the government would undertake a 3-year comprehensive spending review. And as part of that comprehensive spending review, he made it very clear that it would go beyond departmental spending and factor in things like social care, schools and local government. So I very much hope that the Council recognises, alongside the Government's commitment to set out its views on capital spending in that 3-year envelope, that we see this as an opportunity and where the Council can actually lobby as part of the comprehensive spending review for us to obviously get our fair share of that. I see that as a distinct opportunity and the Council should view that in that light.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chair. I return to one of my usual themes on the financial reports, and that's recommendation A1, representing 0.03% of the gross general fund budget. The 0.3% actually refers to the gross expenditure for the year ending 31st of March 2018. The budget figure is, as I've said before, is what is agreed at the Council in February. So the statement is not strictly accurate. You can't determine the gross expenditure until the end of the year. So you're not actually comparing like with like. Also, the gross expenditure includes huge chunks of uncontrollable expenditure, which is added in after we've set the budget. So, if you want to be 3.3% of the figure, then you need to say what that figure is and not make something up. If you're looking at the
Councillor Carter, are we still on questions?
Yes.
I haven't heard one again.
So why isn't it being put in correctly?
Thank you.
So I think I've provided the response to the question that Councillor Carter is asking tonight on a previous occasion, and the variance is aligned with the figures that we use in determining the gross forecast expenditure for the Council at budget setting. So I think the statement in A1 is actually correct in that it is comparing the variation with the gross general fund budget.
And not making things up, Jim.
Thank you. Any further questions? Anybody have a statement to make? Well, I'm going to say a few words. I just want to draw the Cabinet's attention to a few points here. Let's all look again at page 23, as Councillor Charles wanted to, and when we look at the significant risks and opportunities, it's good of him to point out opportunities, but look at the risks. The risk and volatility, 9A, associated with the government's localisation of the business rates, uncertainty, look at in 9D that he spoke on, 10A, the acute housing shortage of all tenures, exacerbated by the 165% increase in homelessness since this government took over. Look, all of the significant risks, almost all of the significant risks that this council is having to deal with are being caused by a Tory government which is frankly so tied up in trying to heal its own rifts that they're not doing very much governing. However, let's move on at some of the good news. On page 29, if you could find that graph, let's look at the total number of complaints. The total number of complaints has gone down to 35, which is the lowest reported since October of 2016. And that's very, very good news for our council. If I draw your attention to page 36, we see that on the percentage of indicators of better on target, this quarter yet again, and our key performance indicators, 100% of them have been met. Now that's the second quarter in a row, the second successive quarter where we've reached 100% of our key performance indicators. And it's the second time ever. Yeah. And it's significantly better than the year before. And if you look at the row underneath that, even though a year ago we met 98% of our targets, now it's 100%, we've actually improved on those indicators by 56%. So this is a council that's delivering services well and delivering services better. And we mustn't forget that. However, look, let's not be complacent. We must never be complacent. We will regularly review KPIs. We'll regularly review the targets that underpin those KPIs, and we may even consider alternative ways of measuring the effectiveness of the service we provide. But let's dwell for a moment on the success of this council, HTS, and give some thanks to the officers and the employees that have brought this about. Thank you. Right. Are we happy to accept that recommendation then?
Agreed.
Thank you. We can now move on to the Housing Revenue Account, Quarter 3 Finance Report 2018 to 19, which is on page 40 to 47.
So moved, Chair.
I second, Chair.
Any Councillor Danvers, do you want to say something?
Fine, Chair.
Any questions?
Unless it's necessary at the end.
All right, let's move straight on to statements. And are we happy to accept the recommendations, A1 and 2?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Right, you've caught me by surprise by moving on so quickly. Right, agenda item 12, Capital Programmes, Quarter 3 Finance Report 18-19, pages 48 to 64.
So moved, Chair.
I second, Chair.
Councillor Danvers, do you want to say anything?
Well, only briefly, Chair. The Housing Capital Programme includes work which continues to deliver significant investment for the building on the decent home standards, as one would build on, wouldn't one? Improving energy efficiency, addressing issues of compliance, and maintaining the programme of disabled adaptations to council dwellings. Other than that, Chair, I think once again I've answered any questions.
Any questions?
Just to reassure you, I asked my questions of the Housing Standard Rules where the reports come first. And I get a much better quality after that.
You're very reassured. So.
And Councillor Carlson, that's the third time I've got you. That wasn't a question. We're not playing third time and you're out. Right, are we all happy to... sorry.
I just want to make a comment.
Comments?
Comment in terms of the refurbishment of properties. I was recently walking around the Northbrooks area, and a whole lot of work has been done on those Northbrooks flats. And I'd just like to pass on the comments of some of the residents, saying how, very much they appreciated the work that had been done on all of the refurbishment work, and that work well done to the officers. And it's a good example of a good council doing something to, in a proactive way to maintain its housing stock.
It's always good to get positive feedback. There's a lot of work to do and we intend to get on and do it. So, are we happy to accept the recommendations A, B and C?
Agreed.
Agreed. Lovely, thank you. So let's move on to agenda item 13, HTS Property Environment Limited Contract Awards.
I formally move this item, Chair.
And I'll second it. It's on page 65 to 70 of your pack.
Agreed.
Do you want to speak first?
I'll speak.
Councillor Charles.
Oh, it's just a question if you can introduce it. It's purely a question. Okay, thank you, Chair.
If we're going to discuss the finances of HTS, yes. If we're not, no.
I'll be careful, Chair. On page 68, paragraph 13, which talks about external works. For years now, councillors have had in their mail boxes and in email concerns, issues from residents around Modern Homes programme and the conduct of contractors. I know that there have been lessons learned and reviews into these matters before. What I was hoping to get was some insight from the council over what additional steps it has learned throughout this process it would need to take to have better scrutiny of contractors, given the issues that all councillors have faced when residents have come to them around some of the issues that they face because of the lack of professionalism, frankly, and I'll be quite blunt about it, of contractors that are in the past now. I think it's important to look at that history and for the council to recognise how it can go forward and look at these matters, particularly around the Modern Homes programme, because I, as a councillor, have faced a number of complaints from residents that have been taken up over the course of years. I think it's something that we need to take on board and reflect on.
Thank you, Chair. The Council, and particularly the Housing Department, regularly review performance of contractors. It's done in a very rigorous manner. The Council will be aware that we have actually taken legal action against one of the contractors. We were remiss not to say the name in this chamber. That's how seriously we take the standard and level what we expect from contractors in delivering decent homes. Because we take it that seriously, we've removed a substantial contract from a contractor only a little while ago. But going forward, Councillor Charles, to answer your question, it is the review of contractor performance that drives that kind of decision. We are sitting in, I think, in a far more comfortable position now. I think the contractors that we work with now are delivering. You'll see decent homes delivery coming through on far better satisfaction rates now, and long may that continue.
Any further questions? Does anybody have anything to say? Right, so are we agreed to accept recommendations 8? Agreed. Thank you. So now let's move on to agenda item 14A, communications from committees, working groups, parties and panels, and A is a referral from the Scrutiny Committee, a review of the impact of permitted development.
I'd like to move this, Chair.
And I'll second it, Chair.
First of all, I would seek patience of my colleagues in moving an amendment to the recommendations, which is brought about by things I'll explain later, but it's to include in A, the recommendation to include the town centre as defined by the red line around the area of action plan. So, with that addition, that is now the new recommendation. This report from the Scrutiny Committee, which we're acting upon, obviously relates to permitted development rights. Since they were introduced in 2013, they've had many serious effects, not least in Harlow, and they've been outlined in media reports recently, and there will be more coming in the future. Particularly the paper last week drew attention to the problems that are faced by schools. And the school that I'm involved in, Tavingsdale School, the closest to Templefields, they're having to cope with under severe strain because of the situation permitted development rights puts them in, with children presenting with all sorts of issues. They consider, and I think this is something we perhaps should take further on their behalf that the boroughs that are sending people to Harlow, that includes children, should actually make some contribution to the extra costs that schools face in having to deal with these extra pupils. But it's not just about the individuals, which, you know, it's not their fault that they've come here with losing all connection with their previous communities and families. And the teams of officers from different services are trying their best to help these people to ameliorate the effects of them being transported here. But of course, it also affects the planning issue as far as Harlow is concerned. Our local plan inquiry started today, and to be honest, permitted development is making a mockery of planning. So much so that at the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town meeting in here a few days ago, it was proposed by a colleague from Hertfordshire that we actually write as a garden town to the Minister, pointing out how does he expect us to plan for the garden town where permitted development rights are just cutting away all the plans that we're trying to make. But of course this is just the end of a chain of events. What's happening in Harlow actually starts with the broken housing market that actually leads to people being evicted from private tenancies, and then local authorities having to carry out their responsibilities for trying to find somewhere for homeless families to go. And that's how they end up in Harlow. But we know where it starts. Now, all the representations that have been made by our MP, by Essex authorities jointly, by our own General Manager who's been up to have a meeting with the Minister, all these representations unfortunately are going to go nowhere, because the Malthouse, the Housing Minister, has recently announced he considers this to be a great success. It's delivered, as far as they're concerned, over 30,000 housing units. Of course, we all know what those housing units actually are. So, in the end, and just one last thing, he's not only considers it a success, but he's looking to expand the permitted development rights to actually start turning shops into units of accommodation. That's why we need to include the town centre. One of the reasons. So, to conclude, the only thing we can do is to apply for Article 4 powers. And we have to apply. We can't carry this through unilaterally. We have to apply to the Minister, and we have to go through certain processes. Now, of course, you could say, why haven't we done this already? The reports and the investigations of the Scrutiny Committee are absolutely essential that we can compile the evidence so that when we go to the Minister, we can show why we need these powers. So I would ask my colleagues and hope that the Cabinet will agree to adopt.
Unfortunately, you couldn't actually make that meeting. It was extremely useful. Both Robert and Brian sort of conveyed the issues quite forcibly to the Minister. I was able to provide a copy of this report. With the excellent Schedule 2 listing, as Councillor Thurman said, the pressures on this council, for which it has has few direct responsibilities. There is no disagreement that it is a mess and something needs to be done about it. And clearly, were we voting, we would support the Article 4 directive. Obviously, the Minister couldn't say anything about the Schedule 4 because he won't be making a decision in due course. But certainly, we were able to lobby and explain what the problems were. Yes, there is a broken housing market. It's been developing over the last 30 years. As no government of any complexion has built enough houses, and it's all just been a growing problem. There's no reason to say that we have to put up with it. obviously those on the boroughs having to refer their people here just don't have the accommodation themselves. But it can be, it can and should be handled better. The local authorities who are transferring should actually contact us or contact us at Essex beforehand to say where there are people in need or in needs are coming and what provision there should be. The Managing Director has written to the London boroughs pointing this out to them, and we were told that those who didn't respond, who don't talk to us when they're sending people, didn't reply to his letter either, which will suggest that the Labour-controlled London boroughs just don't care about their people or about us. But as I say, it was a very useful meeting, very successful, and obviously support the article directive.
Thank you, Councillor Ingle. I've always been very clear where I stand on this permitted development. I think a loophole within the law when it was passed that was designed to support northern industrial cities to reclaim some of their industrial wasteland into much needed housing has been abused by developers around the outskirts of London and abused by many London boroughs in effectively dumping residents just outside of London in councils like our own. I've also always been very proud to say that I'm not just a party man, and I will always criticise my party where I think they are in the wrong, and I've been on the record a number of times in these cabinet meetings and others where I said I think the government needs to do something to deal with this. I was pleased to hear that the Managing Director on behalf of the Council along with the MP met with the Minister, and the feedback that I've got is that that was a very positive meeting. This opposition group is very happy to support you, although we don't have a vote here tonight, is very happy to support you in seeking the Article 4 direction to help solve this situation in Harlow. If it would be of assistance, I'm quite happy to sign a joint letter with you again, as we've done on a number of different issues, to highlight to government that there is cross-party support on this, and this is not just one administration party having this argument. Again, I'm sure Robert Halfon would be willing to sign something with you as well. This is an issue that needs dealing with in the town. It has put immense pressure on social services, on education, on the police. The residents look to us as collectively as leaders in the council to deal with this situation, and I believe the Article 4 direction is the only way that we can do that. So once again, you have my support.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said, Chair. I think we should place on record our thanks to members of the local community, like the head teacher of Tannisdale School, who actually was brave enough to go on record to actually had national publicity over it, to actually expose the iniquities of this new system that the government seems to have invented so it can tick boxes. And the ultimate solution, in my opinion, would actually be to make sure that we go back, as we used to have, up until Thatcher did away with them, of controlled rents, controlled tenancies, and people not just being evicted willy-nilly. So people actually have decent tenancies for a long period of time. People actually have controlled rents and can go to tribunals, and then they will not be knocking at the door, normally of the poorest authorities in London, to actually try and find accommodation from whatever source it's going to come. So yes, there is a solution. It's a political solution. The government has taken the easy way of actually converting offices, and now we hear the new bright idea is to actually convert shops. I assume that the first and second floors and boardwalk and so on will be next on the eyes of these unscrupulous developers who charge a fortune in rents and don't care about people actually living in substandard accommodation.
Councillor Mullen.
It's very rare that you agree with everything that's been said in the room from both sides, and it actually makes me quite proud to be a Harlow councillor to have complete agreement in this room. And I just put on record my thanks for officers and members of the scrutiny committee actually who compiled this report. It really does show that actually these committees can make a difference. and they do punch some weight when they write good reports like this. And if it can lead to evidence for the article for us, really good to hear, so thank you.
Right, I'm going to add a few comments before I turn to Councillor Burton, and it falls to me to disagree with something that Councillor Johnson said. You said you thought this was a poorly thought out piece of legislation, and it may well have been. The effect has been extremely damaging. Let me thank Councillor Carter and our Managing Director for going to see James Brokenshire, the Minister, and for their meeting with him and presenting the concerns on behalf of Harlow. I was unable to attend a hospital appointment with my daughter, rather got in the way. My concern, though, is that you met the Minister on Monday the 11th of March. On the 12th of March, I was again in Westminster at a meeting of the all-party parliamentary group on new towns, when a policy wonk, whose name I can't remember, but very much, in the ear of James Brokenshire, was congratulating himself and the government on the success of permitted development, and talking about, as Councillor Danvers said, how they intend to expand permitted development to include old shop sites. Now, if it were a mistake and it had unintended consequences, and now they have been made aware of those unintended consequences, I cannot for the life of me see why they intend to expand it. Let's hope that the Minister heard, and let's hope that the policy wonk was out of date. Things will change, because this is a real problem. This is a real problem for the people who are relocated without family support networks, people who are relocated without this proper infrastructure being provided for them, without schooling being provided for them by the council of their origination. It's a real problem for existing Harlow residents and their children whose schools become overcrowded. This is a real problem that needs to be addressed. So I do thank you for your support. I'm concerned about what I heard on the 12th of March. Councillor Perrin.
Yeah, well, I just want to emphasise the common view here is not just held in this chamber, but in fact is held by all councils in all parts of the country. I meet colleagues from East Herts, from Hertfordshire, from Essex. All the authorities in Essex wrote jointly. It seems like everybody except the government accepts that this has got to stop. But unfortunately, as has been said, they're going to expand it. And I cannot understand why they seem oblivious to what everybody involved in local government thinks is what should happen, which is that it should stop. Just to make sure everybody understands, this isn't a straightforward process. If we adopt this tonight, which I'm sure we will, this resolution, we have to consult these people for 6 weeks. We have to consult these very developers who are causing the problem to ask them what they think. I'm sure they're not going to agree with us, but also there's the possibility in the future we might even have to pay them compensation for lost profits.
So, are we happy to accept the recommendation A?
Agreed.
As amended. Thank you.
As amended.
Right, so item 14B, a referral from the Cabinet Overview Working Group, Community Engagement Strategy, pages 85 to 103. I'm moving that.
Agreed.
Seconding that.
Any questions? Councillor Charles.
Chair, on page 99 of, and I recognise this is the final report on the engagement strategy. Page 99, there's a table, circular table, that talks about the different, in effect, stakeholders as part of the engagement plan. Is it the Council's intention to adopt a segmented approach, outlining the different ways it will engage with the groups that it's identified in the chart.
No, that's not intended at all, and it's unfortunate if the diagram in the strategy depicts that.
Okay. The next question I have is on page 102. As you know, Jane, I'm a strong believer in measuring success. This is a regular theme of mine, so you wouldn't be surprised that I ask it. On page 102, there's a very brief comment that measurements of success will be factored into a community engagement action plan. Why did the council take the decision in the strategy document not to set out any indicative measures of success that could then inform the action plan? Because inevitably with these engagement plans we need to start setting some meat on the bones and try to commit to greater action and engagement. It's a very important thing and all councillors believe in that. I'm just a bit surprised that in the strategy there was no high level consideration around some KPIs to inform that, because I think that would help the action plan.
So there was a focus group of councillors, and I have to say we didn't actually consider setting out some actions at that point, but we do intend to resurrect that group as soon as possible, and in developing the action plan, that will be one of the first things we do, is start to put some in the bones regarding KPIs.
And one final broader question on the engagement strategy. How is the council going to amend its approach in a positive way to be more reactive? Because of course social media now is very quick and rapid. There are other channels that are emerging, but we've also got to recognise the traditional forms of communication that certain generations rely on, and that's very important. But what considerations is the council given to improving its response to when someone posts a picture of a broken fence, how communications will flow with that individual resident? Because all local authorities are wrestling with the fact that they need to be more responsive in a digital age where social media is so prevalent.
So I think it's a case of keeping the strategy under review. So we expect for this to be rolled out across all staff. We'll have a key point of contact within the council, which hasn't happened till now. And I think it's a case that we case of sharing best practice and just, as I say, keeping the strategy under review and our action plan under review at all times.
Any other questions? Comments? Good. Okay. Are we happy to accept recommendation A?
Agreed.
Good. So let's move on to agenda item 14C, which is a referral from the Scrutiny Committee improving the provision of bus services in Harlow, pages 104 to 110.
Chair, I'd like to move the recommendations in this report.
And I'll second it.
This is another issue on which every councillor I meet, whatever colour, actually agrees that the present system isn't working. Apart from London, where obviously there is regulation and bus services have improved dramatically over the last couple of decades, whereas in the rest of the country, with deregulation was introduced, they've actually plummeted to skeleton proportions. We're suffering at the moment from our own main supplier of bus services in Harlow, apparently being on the long end of a financial problem in Germany with the railways. I won't explain that, it's a long story. However, again, there are limited options that we can take, limited paths we can follow to try and address this particular problem. But there is one. It's very tortuous, it's strewn with difficulties, but it starts with the rather mundane recommendation in this report that we refer the outcome of the consultation to the Garden Town Board. The reason for that is you have to build a partnership of local interests, including the county councils, including your neighbouring authorities, to put a package to the government to ask for some form of ability to influence local bus services. As the Garden Town, in its vision, actually sets out
the public transport facilities it wants to provide or wants to see provided, then obviously it will require some powers to do that. And so we're following that particular, we're hoping that particular route is going to lead to, hopefully it's going to take some time, but this is the first step. As someone famous said, every journey starts with the first step, and this is the first step. I thank the Scrutiny Committee for their investigation and their report, and hope that the Cabinet will refer this to the Guardtown Board.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Any questions? Councillor Charles.
Yeah, clearly all councillors are aware of the decision by the PAH board, Princess Alexandra Hospital board, to select a preferred site for the hospital. Why that's relevant in this case is that we need to factor in the wider infrastructure concerns and the public transport that would be factored into the pre-consultation business plan. Clearly, transport, public transport will need to be factored into that. And as I'm sure all councillors will want to get behind a new Harlow hospital, we need to factor in with bus routes and the links to public transport that is at forefront of Lance McCarthy and his excellent board's mind, and I hope that is carried by Brian, who's obviously the key link point there with PAH and other colleagues here present.
I'd just like to reassure everybody that when I talk to Lance and his team, particularly about their preferred site, first thing I say is you've got to make sure everybody can get there. Accessibility is the issue. If you're going to a site outside the centre, Harlow residents must be confident that they can get to there. So I'm totally on board with that.
Great.
That point has been made in every meeting that we've had. Any further questions? I think you've had your statement, so let's move. Are we happy to accept the recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. So, there are no minutes from the panels or working groups, I understand, and there are no matters of urgent business, so I'll call this meeting to a close. Thank you to the public for attending. Thank you, councillors and officers. Gentlemen,